Hello, LinkedIn, and hello to my friends and colleagues in Beijing. I am Jackson Ewing, a senior fellow at the Duke University Institute for Environmental Policy Solutions, and I'm happy to convene a brief conversation with Zhao, Climate Director at EDF China, and Zhibin, the SinoCarbon Director of Finance and International Business. We are going to, over the next 15 or 20 minutes, discuss the most important development in Chinese climate policy in recent times, and that is the launch of active trading in the national ETS. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Lulu, I want to start with you. On Friday, we saw active trading begin. We saw just over 4 million tons of allowances change hands. We saw them trade at just over 50 RMB, roughly $8 a ton. I know it's early, but do you have any takeaways from this first period of trading?
Yes, thank you for the question. The price and trading volume, trading value are definitely the topics people are talking about. I think it shows that all of the power companies that participated in the early trading, that they have a stable expectation or they're confident in the role of carbon market will make to achieving peaking and or in the long-term neutrality. So that's why they want to invest in this activity. And also the price actually are very high. It almost meet the upper collar of the first trading day. For today, the price is still around 52 RMB. So I think that's basically how you see the carbon markets are expected through the lens of the the power generation companies.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I was interested to see also what some of the companies, who some of the companies were that were participating in this trading. And when you look at it, it's some of the largest power companies in the country, certainly. So it shows that sort of confidence that the market is truly up and running. And as you say, really exceeded the goal of 40 RMB for where we wanted to start on this. Zhibin, anything to add?
Yeah, besides of the trading volume and price, something like that, I want to say the launch of the carbon market really starts the carbon policy in China. Everybody in China now talk about if you emit, you have to pay, and if you reduce the CO2 emission, you can get money, something like that. And a lot of people are asking, my renewable project, can that earn some credit? My forest, can that earn some credits? That really grow people's mind and let people talk about real abatement action. That's a very important meaning of besides of the real trading.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I have to give away that Lulu actually made that very same point on a CGTV interview last night. So you are certainly on the same page there. This sorts of signals that it puts out to market participants is enormous. We were just talking offline before getting started here about the fact that China officially launched the ETS in December of 2017, and really the background of piloting and of announcing the intention of developing a national ETS goes back much further to almost a decade ago now. This has led to some observers to kind of have finally active trading is up and moving. But of course, there have been many things going on since 2017 to get the country ready. And I know both of you and your organizations have been really involved in those efforts. So, Lulu, can you start by telling us a little bit about what it has taken to get to this point of active trading? What are some of the most important pieces of market infrastructure that have been put in place since 2017, why it's happening now, and what that can tell us?
Okay. So one thing I want to share or I want to discuss was the massive government reform that happened in the March of 2018. So right after the 2017 so-called launch. So that massive government reform moved the climate change department from the NDRC, the economic planning department, to MEE, Ministry of Ecology and Environment. So that's a huge decision. And that also means the delay are caused by the re-education of the government officials. So a lot of the activities and efforts were done to educate central level, provincial environmental officials, the enforcement officials, and inspectors to help these environment officials understand what is climate change, what is CO2, what's different between CO2 and conventional pollutions. And so the NE actually went through a lot of infrastructure building other than registry and treating platform. There's also this data reporting system been built into the already existing environment permitting system. So all of the covered entities and the non-covered entities that need to report their emission annually are already started to report their 2019 and 2020 data through this environment reporting system. So that's important because that's not only for the state of carbon market, it also help the government or help China to have a comprehensive data or greenhouse gas information disclosure system. And also there's, of course, a lot of other things have been done, like the MRV methodologies improvement, allocation methodologies. And also the government is trying to push for a management decree of carbon market before the end of this year. So that's a large, massive amount of work. And also I want to add that China's carbon market, although a lot of people talk about it, it's only covered power sector, but it's already 4.5 billion tons of CO2, representing 12.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, those are truly amazing figures. And one thing that you two both know better than most is that you not only have to make all this regulatory progress, but also have to train the roughly 2,000 covered entities in how to effectively operate within this market and give them the right signals and the right skills to be able to participate in the market effectively, which I know has also been an extremely heavy lift. And this representation of global emissions is also set only to grow as sectors expand into the key industrial sources of emissions. And in the not too distant future, it seems like at least a couple of sectors, potentially aluminium, cement, might happen in the relative near term, with more industrial sectors to follow. I want to stay on this topic of governance, Lulu, that you began with, and move to you, Zhibin. Lulu mentions the move of the mandate for the ETS from the NDRC to the MEE. But one thing that you and I have corresponded on this year is the need for interministerial and intra-governmental coordination and leadership that goes beyond just the MEE. And that includes ministries of commerce, ministries of finance, the Chinese banking and financial sector, the NDRC itself, and the NEA, both of which have duties to plan China's strategic energy and industrial policies, for example. So one, to begin with, can you just explain a little bit more of the need for that kind of cross-government coordination and activity? And maybe say a few things about the potential for the legal foundation through legislation of the ETS strengthening and how that might shift the market a bit.
Okay. Yes. As you know, the China ETS is an intensity-based market, and we don't have absolute cap right now. That's because the whole emission is still growing. We will peak the emission before 2030. So that's the background of the China ETS. And in other ETS, they have the absolute cap and the emission payment time before setting up national ETS. But in China, we have national ETS, and then we are still developing our peaking roadmap. That's one of the significant difference between the China ETS and other ETS. So, of course, MEE is doing great. They are preparing a lot of technical guidelines. But when we talk about how to set a cap for the ETS, we need the NDRC because it also manages the Energy Bureau, National Energy Bureau, and then we also need other government departments who is in charge of this industrial sectors. So they are doing the peaking roadmap. And with that peaking roadmap, we can transit from the intensity-based to an absolute cap base. That's very important for the long-term development of national ETS. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good point. The fact that China uses these efficiency standards that measures and regulates emissions based on output, not in an absolute sense, does lead to this need for coordination and need for kind of an intersection with economic and industrial policy. That's sometimes perhaps missed or at least underemphasized in that respect. Lulu, I want to move to kind of more the nuts and bolts of how the covered entities, in this case, power sector actors, are likely to operate in the market and how the market might change their calculations from what they were to what they now will be. So, how do you see the power companies adapting to their new compliance obligations? Are they going to be reducing their emissions by switching to lower carbon fuels? By finding kind of low-hanging fruit abatement options internally, such as improving energy efficiency? Will they reduce production in some cases? And to what extent do you see them kind of moving towards the market to buy allowances to make up for shortfalls? And I recognize that's a difficult question because different companies are going to operate in different ways. But anything you can say about that kind of menu of options and how that might be different today than it was on Thursday before this kicked off?
Okay. So it's a really difficult question. I don't think I can answer that in several sentences, or any of us know the answer by now. But the interesting part is I've actually, we've all seen that all of the major power companies, or we call it the 5 major companies and 5 small, large enterprises, they all build out or set up their own carbon asset management subsidies, or improve their the importance of this. So that actually shows how the holding company think this is important. And also we've been approached by a lot of the other subsidiary companies, for example, information system companies, or strategy department. They all want to understand what carbon market or this carbon policies will influence their decision making in the daily life. So before carbon market, I think climate policy are policies that will maybe influence there in the longer term. But when we launch this carbon market, I think it's right here now. So that's really the power I can feel.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point on the signal that's being sent by the development of those kind of carbon asset management wings of the companies. Do you think that situation you just described will change in any important ways with the entrance of more financial institutions, kind of third-party actors in the market, which again seems likely to happen relatively soon, sooner than I think expected by some observers?
Yes, and a lot of the other, like the central bank, all of the other ministries are thinking of this as well, because climate change or carbon market, carbon pricing is not only influence carbon market, and it's also influence the decision making, and as well as climate information disclosure will influence a lot of things. Like, for example, legal in general right now is divest a lot of Chinese listed company because they don't disclose information, climate-related information. So with carbon market, it's actually empowered the company to do it with very low cost. As actually they've already know the information, they just need it they need to feel confident that this information is good enough to share with all of the stakeholders.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. We're into our last 5 minutes, so I'm going to round out with some really kind of blue sky looking forward questions. And I'll start with you, Zhibin. Many have argued that the ETS could be more effective in a more liberalized Chinese power market, one that can handle sort of spot market transactions and dispatch that can recognize the needs that come from episodic renewables entering the grid at different volumes at different times, the potential for trading across different provinces, the potential for price signals filtering down into customer bases more than is currently the case through guaranteed purchasing agreements and the like. So what do you think about this idea of continuing power market reform, which is ongoing in China, and the ETS, and what are the prospects for success there or the challenges that remain?
Yes, the current power market reform is ongoing, but most of the transactions happen inside one province. So there are not very across province or maybe some. There are not many transactions between the state grid in the south or the more or southern grid in the south. So there are still problems need to be solved. It's not a national market, and of course I agree that if we have a more free power market, the carbon market will be more effective. I think that's a fair point. However, in the carbon market, we already consider the indirect emission, and I checked the guidelines today, and I see some when we calculate the indirect emission, we if the power if the user of the electricity, they can prove what kind of source they buy the electricity, so they can prove how many percentage or how many gigawatt I buy from uh, renewable energy, from solar panels, from wind farm, that they can reduce their emission. So it's already considered that can solve part of the problem, I think. And of course, we also have the indirect emission from the grid. If you cannot demonstrate anything, you still use the same emission factor. I think that's also okay for now. And after 5 years, I think both systems will have a new look, and then we will research how to interact with each other during this time. Yeah.
Thank you. Certainly a work in progress. Lulu, we've mentioned that China's system is somewhat unique, not wholly unique, however, in its use of efficiency-based targets based on output. There are, however, discussions and movements toward a kind of backstopping control hard cap for the system in the near term, and a potential transition to a hard cap in the future that would make it more like the ETSs that we're familiar with in Europe or California or elsewhere. Do you see China moving towards a hard cap, and what kind of time horizon might you predict for that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely approaching, because the reason we don't have a hard cap right now is because we are launching this carbon market during the COVID phase. It covers 2019 and 2020. So when we do this allocation, the government actually don't have a really clear idea of how the power sector will look like. So that's why they choose this way. That's one of the reasons they choose this output base. So for all of the pilots that China has been working on since the 2013, every single one of the pilots have a absolute cap. So the experts, the government officials, all of the people working on this understand it's working and understand that hard cap is important. So with the government setting up this carbon peaking goal, so they want to figure out what is the relationship between carbon market and peaking. Once they figure that out, an absolute cap and a declining cap will be very soon. So I'm very confident in that.
Yeah, thanks. Of course, peaking is a moving target itself. You can peak at different levels, but we are seeing potential for more absolute targets creeping into different sector-based targets of the 14th five-year plan, for example, as we've seen in the past. So it'll be interesting to look at a number of different things there. Final question.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I just want to add, the Climate Change Department recently issued endorsement letter or in-trust letter to all of the industry associations, include petrochemical, chemical, aluminum, iron, steel, and cement, to ask them to function as the extended arm to help, for example, develop allocation methodologies and market methodologies, capacity building. So the phase of including other sectors is approaching as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, faster than many observers would have predicted. I promised to get you out of here in 20 minutes. Unsurprisingly, I'm going to make a small liar of myself on that and ask one final question. Of course, the ETS is not the only game in town. We see 10,000 Enterprises program. We see regulations for particulate pollution. We see different sorts of energy mix policies and other market-based mechanisms, renewable portfolio standards, certificate schemes, et cetera. So there are justifiable questions about how important the ETS is now relative to those other approaches and how important it's going to be in the future. So as a final thought, we'll start with you, Zhibin, and then move to you, Lulu, for our last word. Looking back at the ETS, say in the mid-2020s or late 2020s, do you think it's going to be a pillar of China's national climate change policy driving towards these 2030 or 2060 goals?
Yes, I believe so. As you know, there's only one. Of course, we will see a lot of others coming, but currently the national ETS is the only one policy that targets GHG emission or GHG abatement directly. So, by mid-2020, we will meet the peaking of coal consumption. So that's a very significant point. When we talk about peaking, how to set the recap that 2025 is a very important time. Maybe by then we will see the peak of coal-fired generator. So that I think at that time we will see and as recap we will see cap decrease year by year, and then that time ETS will absolutely make an important role, very important role. Yes.
Thank you, Lulu.
Yeah, I think ETS is the current pilot instrument that we see have too. So it is managed by the MEE, which has environment police as the backup or the enforcement power. So I really believe that ETS, with more importance that we see China has been putting a lot of faith on enforcement, environment enforcement activities. They will be able to do this as very like if you don't do compliance by the end of the year, there's a lot of fines or other measures the ME will be able to do. So I believe this policy will be more and more stronger and strengthened through years. So it will be one of the major instruments.
Thank you so much to the EDF's Zhao Xiaolu and to SinoCarbon's Chen Zhibin for your time and expertise. I know that this is the fruition of years and years of work from you both and from your colleagues at your organizations. Look forward to continuing to work with you on this into the future. Thanks for everyone who attended, and all the best.
Thank you.
Have a good day.